Mazel tov. Over the past few months, I've gotten to know a bit about Babel's Blessings, which is a grassroots language school in England, which runs affordable language classes for adults. Mixed in with courses in Arabic, Bengali, Spanish, and Turkish are lessons in Yiddish, Yiddish song, Torah chanting, laning, and a B'nai Mitzvah program, especially designed for those who did not have a bar or bat mitzvah, didn't like theirs, or did it in the wrong name or gender. The funds raised in teaching these courses are used to help run a program of free English classes for migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers. Now, the first time I heard the name of this program, I was confused. Babel's Blessings? Who's Babel? And while I'm sure students in the program are blessed to participate, what kind of donation did Babel give? Or was Babel an influential communist thinker I haven't heard about yet? Who was Babel to give out these blessings? Student Rabbi Lev Taylor soon explained to me that the term comes from this week's Torah portion, the Tower of Babel. The experience of that conversation reminded me of one of the best lectures I attended in my undergraduate. I had the honor of learning with a Brazilian Jewish professor of blessed memory, Jonas Zonenstein, who incidentally wrote one of my recommendations for rabbinical school. And he gave a fascinating hour-and-a-half-long talk about cacao, about this mythical item, this mythical good, which he explained how it was created, how it was farmed, how it was harvested, the port fees and the taxes, and how it was eventually brought to market, creating jobs along the way, explaining the whole international monetary system through this mythical good. And I'll never forget his last words of that lecture. In the end, he said, "And then you have chocolate." Because with those words, I realized he was not talking about a mythical good, which did allow me to understand the lecture in a different way, but about cocoa. And suddenly, it made sense. Was limited more, but made more sense. I'm sure that I'm not the only one who has had these moments of confusion, of othering, and then hopefully, finally, moments of clarity. It says later in our Torah portion, Al ken kara shma Bavel, ki sham balal Adonai tzvat kol haaretz. And that is why the city is called Bavel, Babylon, because that is where the Eternal confused the language of the land. Interesting side note, scholars say probably the real name of the city, the meaning is Baba El, like Baba Kama, Baba Matzia, the gates of God. But that's not the etymology we get in our Torah. Instead, we get a moment of confusion, a moment of mixing up. Let me read another section in more detail of this Torah portion. Vayared Adonai lirot et ha'ir v'et hamigdal. The Eternal came down to look at the city and the tower that man had built. Vayomer Adonai, hen am echad, v'safa echat. And the Eternal said, if as one people with one language for all, this is how they have begun to act, then nothing they may propose to do will be out of their reach. V'hava nerda, and let us then go down and confound their speech, so that they shall not understand one another's speech. Let us go down? I learned in religious school, Adonai Echad, that God is one. What do you mean, let us go down? If it wasn't in the Torah, I would be scandalized. Rashi explains, come, let us go down. This means that God, in Rashi's words, he took counsel with his judicial court because of his exceeding meekness. Other commentators, like Radak Kimchi, disagree. This isn't the rabbinic court that God is speaking to. It's just a way of speech. It's politeness when you're going to destroy something to talk in this way, in the plural. We also see, by the way, Pharaoh talks in the plural, the royal we, before Pharaoh goes and plots the destruction of the Jewish people. Last week in Genesis, we were introduced to Elohim, the singular God with the impressive plural ending. But this week's tower story is written Yod-He Vav-He. A modern-day Bible teacher might say that this is the royal we, as the protagonist in The Windsor Knot might say, we are not amused. I will admit I am sometimes sloppy in my grammar, sometimes colloquialisms and code switching enter into my speech at the wrong moments. And I know that I am not the only one where language in different spaces, in different groups, switches, talks, changes, and emerges differently. Language evolves. Sometimes this is a devolution, and nuance is lost. But sometimes as language changes, it adds opportunity for finer descriptions, for more clarity rather than less. Looking at the Oxford English Dictionary's evolution and addition of new words, we see a definition added this year for essential worker, social distance, that take two different comments, two different broken pieces of Babel and put them together to form a new meaning. In 2020, even as a follically challenged individual, I was able to officially start adulting, paying bills, grocery shopping, not because I hadn't been doing those things before, but because that word was shaped and redefined and recreated by the popular culture to become more descriptive. The same is true for they. Many of us grew up at a time when they was plural. But of course, as we go further and further from the tower, the richness of diversity creates more opportunities for thick description, and they is now a great, more descriptive way for some individuals who don't fit clearly into him or her to find an echo of the singular self. Maimonides taught that we can never describe God. We can't truly say God is powerful or God lives in the positive, because those descriptions confine God. They place God into a neat box of human understanding. Any attempt to fathom the unfathomable and confine God to language is doomed to possibly belittling and diminishing the unknowable God. It says in our Torah, God is a man of war. Yes. And it says in our Torah, God is the rock that carried you in the womb and gave birth to you and gave you comfort. Yes, and much more besides. Though some don't like the singular they for God, because it might seem like a plural understanding. Some don't like that the they has the potential to seem plural. They like ideas of the unknowable one and the loving one that contain the concept of God. I understand that, but I am starting to like the divine they. Language has evolved now. Language has allowed this formulation which bursts off the page and lacks some control of comprehension when we see it. In that he and she are binary gender constructs inside of a relatively limited range of my understanding. While they create light and darkness, make peace and everything, is potent in its lack of exactness, in its recognition of a spectrum with colors beyond the range of human sight. Like cacao, a mythical item, an X, rather than the thing which makes chocolate. While Mark Silk and others are calling for the wide adoption of they, Oziv Zermatiyah by Hili Yeshua, they are my strength and my deliverance. I personally have always been a fan of using names rather than pronouns. God is my strength and my deliverance. And I do think it is worth celebrating how language has evolved yet again to be able to let the indescribable this time remain indescribable. Babel's blessing is in the diversity and beauty of language, and we are the inheritors of this gift. Now, I know this wish sounds like something I might say to my children, but it's true nonetheless. May this be a gift which we remember to take off the shelf and play with, to enjoy in its spectrum of understanding. And let's not forget to thank them. Shabbat Shalom.